Hey, this is Dr. Keith Hersey, and you are listening to the Destroying Diabetes podcast. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Keith once again. I'm glad that you're able to join us on our podcast, Destroying Diabetes. They let me in again, so they didn't lock the door. So I guess that it's still okay to do another episode. I know one day I'm going to come in here and they're going to have everything locked up, and that'll be the end of the podcast. But they did, and they let me back in today. And I'm so glad that you're here right now. By the time that you hear this podcast, we will be in the midst of the holiday season. And I know that the holiday season can be very challenging to us type 2 diabetes patients. A lot of food, a lot of parties, Christmas parties, holiday gatherings, a lot of temptations to kind of go off the track of healthy eating and mindful eating. So I'm so pleased that I'm able to have a guest today that's going to help us with that. Is Jennifer Morwick. She works with the Durham County Department of Public Health. She's a diabetes care and education specialist. And she's worked there for almost 25 years. She has a master's in nutrition from the University of Vermont, and she has a bachelor's degree from biology from NC State. So I would like to welcome her to the podcast, and we have something in common just from your bio. We both have parents of teenagers, boys, and I have and you have your pups. I have a rescue dog that thinks she's a puppy.
Both of ours are rescue dogs too, and one is an English pointer, and I've never seen a dog with more energy in my life.
Oh yeah. Mine is she's calmer. She's a pit bull mix, and she's always makes everything entertaining at home.
That's awesome. So, they make life better for sure.
Yeah, I know. So thank you for appearing today. The main thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of like try to get people in the right mindset, because I said it's a challenging time of the year. It's easy to fall off track or stay on track.
Yes.
So I do like having a nutritional expert like yourself kind of like to give our audience like some advice and pointers how to handle this challenging season. And so I'm really glad that you are able to come on today and give us just some good advice.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. And I would agree that the holiday season can be tough when you're trying to manage your blood sugar. But I know that it can be done. And if I had to think about the most important thing to do, it would be to have a game plan ahead for the season. I mean, we've already had Thanksgiving go, but we still have Christmas parties coming up. And it's important to have a game plan before you go into situations that you know may be tempting for you to get more off track than you would like.
Okay, yeah, there's definitely recommend you just come in prepared beforehand so that when those temptations come up, you can be able to deal with them and manage them. So,
I heard an interesting analogy today. It was a physician who was saying that think of when you're living with diabetes, think about the holidays as like a road trip. and you're trying to stay on the road as best you can, but you are fully aware that there will be moments, when you go to a friend's house for a Christmas event, or you've got something going on at church and there's going to be lots of sweets. Like, that there are going to be these little trips along the way, but you also know after those events, you get right back on your track. And that way you can get through the holidays relatively unscathed. We've got to remember that it's not a time it is a celebratory time, but think about specific instances along the way that you're going to need to have a particular game plan in place.
Okay. So what would you suggest, I guess, like as far as a game plan, like kind of a basic game plan that kind of, most people can or be applied to most people?
Well, I definitely have some ideas, and some of them are biggies and some aren't as big. But one of the biggest things to think about is to try to continue to eat at consistent times. I know that when I grew up, we got up on Thanksgiving morning and we didn't go to my Aunt Jean's until 2:00, and nobody ate until then. It was as if we were saving up our appetite for the big celebration. Well, that can get really tricky when you're living with diabetes, because if you skip your breakfast, then you run the risk of having a low blood sugar. It also means you're going to kind of go into that meal primed to overeat. You hadn't had anything on your stomach. It's go time. And then it's going to be harder to make choices that you might be happy with in the end.
Okay. And do you suggest, like, beforehand, of course, not to starve yourself the whole day until, the dinner or the event or whatever, but what would you suggest just as far as eating before the event? Like would they have the same breakfast or a different type of breakfast?
I am a big fan of having protein at every meal.
Okay.
And so, if it's important to eat breakfast on your regular schedule and include a source of protein, which could be eggs. It could be Greek yogurt, or it could be cottage cheese. It could be peanut butter. You could even use a small handful of nuts, and you could get protein and some fat from that. And those things will help fill you up so that you're not starving going into that meal. And I'd also encourage folks that, like my family, like I was saying before, we grew up eating our meal, like between 1 and 3. If you normally have lunch at 1:00 and dinner's not going to be on the table until 3, I'm going to really encourage you to have a little bite of something to eat at your normal time. Again, to keep you from having a low sugar. And at that point, it might be, you could grab some veggies with ranch dressing or veggies with hummus. Some of the Greek yogurt that I mentioned earlier. It could be half of a peanut butter sandwich. Just a little something on your tummy so that you're not walking into that meal with nothing.
Yeah. Well, definitely is. Definitely. You want to control the low blood sugars, and then also what would you recommend as far as trying to limit some of the glucose spikes, or not have the glucose spikes to be so high?
Well, that is where protein comes into play again. So as an example, with your Thanksgiving plate, often the protein source we would have would be turkey. At Christmas, it might be turkey. Some folks have red meat for their protein source with that meal. Or it could be a ham. So the protein of a meal helps buffer how much your blood sugars rise from the food that you eat that does make your blood sugar go up. So, the foods that make your blood sugar go up are carbohydrate foods. So you always want to pair carbohydrate food with protein food to help buffer those spikes.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I've heard and studied that kind of people saying like kind of like cloaking you like your food, like having something that doesn't raise your blood glucose, along with something that will raise it, or having that beforehand to kind of minimize the spikes, because
Mm-hmm.
and then I know that sometimes people will, especially if people are like on insulin, that they may raise their insulin up, knowing that they're not going to eat well, or so they may take and I don't know if that's always like a good idea, if they want to raise like the insulin that they take that day, to try to compensate for the blood
Well,
glucose spikes.
I actually think that's a great idea. I mean, that's someone managing their diabetes. It's the holidays. If we have found a way for someone to be able to enjoy their family gathering and keep their blood sugars under control, if it means a little bit of extra insulin to cover that meal, I'm all for it.
Okay.
We're not talking about, you remember the road we were talking about earlier? We're not talking about doing it all the time. It's just every now and then for one of those occasions.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so what would you recommend? Because I mean, I know in my family and most people's family, besides the meal itself, the biggest thing, and then also with Christmas parties and New Year's parties, is the desserts. It's like, how do you handle that? How do you handle those?
Well, I think there are a couple of ways to tackle it. One, I think that you can, say, have a little bit fewer of the carbohydrate foods on your actual plate to make up for the fact you're going to have some dessert. So you might not have the roll, and then you'll have a piece of pie instead. But there are also choices that you can make among the desserts. For an example, there's a really big difference in the sugar content of pecan pie versus pumpkin pie. So pumpkin pie also is a great source of fiber and lots of beta carotene. So you're getting something with a lot of nutritional value, and it's not full of caro syrup like pecan pie would be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And try, I think another suggestion is, will you even like pick up your plate, go do a little walkthrough, look and see what see what the table looks like, so you can get a game plan. As an example, I'm encouraging you to have your eyes look for the green veggies, for non-starchy vegetables that are full of fiber and won't raise your blood sugar, and they will help fill you up. With Thanksgiving, just like any other meal, I do encourage half of your plate to have non-starchy veggies on it.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Yeah, yeah. The biggest thing, like I said, is to have like a game plan ahead of time.
Absolutely.
Like I think like in Thanksgiving for myself, because I knew all this stuff was going to that was going to be out there. So my initial plate was like, I tried to get like non-starchy vegetables, and at first, my first thing, and some turkey as the protein, and then I had some carbs and stuff later to try to kind of minimize the glucose spikes. And so and I have like a continuous glucose monitor, so I'm always looking
so you can really
at, and kind of got a good idea like which foods really spike it and which ones sort of spike it. So usually like doing something like that, usually most of the time that the spikes are not as high when I usually do that. So
I think that's a great.
Yeah, so I went with that going in. That was the game plan for me before I went with Thanksgiving, and I'm sure that'll be the same thing with Christmas too.
You bring up a really good point too, that you were using your monitoring to help make decisions. And I think that's something that's really important for folks to remember, that if you have access to your blood glucose monitor, I would encourage you to test a bit more frequently. Like if you know you're eating more than you normally would, have an idea of what's going on with your blood sugars, just so you can head off any problems.
Yep.
I'd also put a big plug in for a walk after your meal.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's just a lot of a lot of studies have shown now that just like a 10-minute walk after eating something big like that, it kind of minimizes the blood glucose spikes. And I guess it was something that, like I said, our grandparents and people know, because when people used to have like the big meal, big dinner, and then they would just go walk around the neighborhood or whatever, and visit people. So I guess they knew something we didn't know.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite memories is, again, I mentioned in my Aunt Jean, we went to my Aunt Jean's house, and she lived close to the waterway. And after our Thanksgiving and our Christmas meals, the whole family, like 20 of us, walked down to the waterway and, just got out and got some fresh air. And without even realizing it, we opened up our little muscles of our cellular muscles to taking all that sugar out of our bloodstream. So we were doing ourselves some good.
Yeah. That's definitely, that's definitely, like I said, it's just, I guess, thing that how much they, without knowing, they didn't have the access to technology, but just, I guess, common sense and
and living with some intent, like paying attention to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Do we have a second for me to mention alcohol?
Yes. Well, definitely, especially like Christmas and New Year's. That's going to be a big thing, So definitely. If you could talk about that.
I'll tell you, alcohol can get a little bit complicated because, as you well know, as a pharmacist, different medications can have different impacts on your blood glucose levels when you also are drinking alcohol. You can often have your blood sugars go low. And so I really encourage folks that if they're going to have a glass of wine, to do it with dinner, or if they are at a party, to eat some of the appetizers so that there's something on their tummy that they can digest so their blood sugar doesn't go low as a result of the alcohol. But then on the other side of the coin, if the alcohol that you're drinking is in a juice, say, like something really, really sweet, then you run the risk of running your blood sugars high. So alcohol, one, you've got to, you want to be careful. You don't want to go overboard. And when you do have it, make sure that you have a bite to eat with it. And again, whenever I'm talking about having a bite to eat, I'm usually talking about making sure you have a source of protein, and then produce would be a great choice.
Yeah. So that definitely, like I said, there's a lot of things that you kind of have to kind of manage as everybody has to manage in general. And then being a type 2 diabetic, then the other things that you manage, which you kind of, you have to be more mindful now, but usually pretty much, all the time you have to be kind of mindful. And like I said, like mindful eating is it's a big key, in being able to manage your type 2 diabetes and not let it get progressively worse. And so,
well, and speaking of mindful eating, I think that's a great technique that you could use at the table when you are at some of these events where you're concerned that you may overeat. Employ some tactics like making sure that you put your fork down between your bites, or have a sip of water between bites. Those little things slow you down, and so you're less likely to eat as much. I mean, you're already sitting around the table with all your friends and your loved ones, and you're probably joking and cutting up. You're going to be there anyway, so just take your time with the food.
Yeah.
And I suspect you'd eat less.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And can I mention also that I want everyone to work to manage their diabetes, because when we do control blood sugars, you feel better. And I want everybody to feel good in the holidays.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also think it's important to remember to offer yourself the grace that you would offer a friend. And if you've got a little off track at a meal, just forgive yourself and get back on the road that I was talking about earlier when we were speaking.
Yeah. 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 And that's definitely the thing. You just and everybody gets off track. I get off track, every once in a while, and that's one of the things I've had to learn, just to just move forward, just be like, acknowledge, that it happened, and just go forward and continue things. I guess it's, you just try to do, like, if in my own thing, if I eating well, at least 85% of the time, then I don't kill myself over the 15% that I'm not doing it.
And
so,
I think that's a great philosophy to have when it comes to this. I really do. Monitoring your blood sugars and making sure that you manage them well is a form of self-care. And forgiving yourself is also a form of self-care. And, acknowledging that you're human. And I'm a dietitian, and, sometimes I joke that I like to leave my job at the office.
mm-hmm.
I don't, I eat like most anybody else would. And I try to be mindful most of the time, but I guarantee you my plate for lunch is not going to look like a my plate version every day.
Yeah.
So you got to offer yourself and give yourself some space and some grace.
Yeah. And so what would be, I guess, like you've already touched on that. What would be like your biggest advice for type 2 diabetics, just to handle themselves through the holiday season, and being able to continue?
I'll touch back on the planning, thinking ahead to the situations that you might encounter, so that you already have a game plan for when it happens. Think about how you're going to handle if you go to work and there are always cookies in the break room. What are you going to do about that? Maybe you make sure to bring a really nice snack home for yourself from home that you can enjoy. Or maybe you decide you try to keep your distance from that room for a while. If there are temptations in there that you're not wanting, that you're trying to hold off for those special occasions that I mentioned earlier, when you're having get-togethers with family and friends, and it doesn't become, 6 weeks of candies and cookies every day.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And I think that's just, I just think that's just, that's just like great advice. Just to, as you go, just even do your day to day, just, having a game plan, just, being mindful of what you eat. And if you do slip up, just having the thing to just, forgive yourself and continue to move forward, because
that's right.
It's a process. And like I tell my patients that I work with, is it's a process. As long as you're moving forward over time, even if it's just a few inches.
That's right.
As long as you're moving, forward into the direction to having your type 2 diabetes under control, having the energy to be able to do what you want in life, minimize the complications from it, so that doesn't bring your life down. So that's what it's all about. So
I would agree with you completely.
All right. Well, Jennifer, I really thank you for just taking the time out to be with us today. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of great feedback from our audience. I think it's a lot of useful information that can use for the holidays, and as a matter of fact, just like year round, even besides the holidays, because a lot of these pertain year round, not just during the holiday season. But I just want my audience to get like some insights from the, a nutrition expert. And just, as far as how to manage that, because I just know from my own experience, it is a big challenge. And just, have some advice and tips. And I hope that people can gather some advice and tips that they can implement to get them through the holiday season and through the end of the year. So I really like to thank you for appearing on that podcast today. And I'm just
I appreciate the invitation.
All right. So thank you so much for appearing on there. And we'll have to have you back again, because we'll always have something coming up, Valentine's Day, stuff like that.
Well, I'd love to. Yeah, this has been fun.
All right. Well, thank you so much for appearing on here today.
So welcome.
And again, we'll also just continue to just provide information in our future episodes. And if you have any questions that you have for me, or if you have for Jennifer, I can pass them along to her. When you can just email us in the email in the show notes, and I'll be glad to pass that along to her if you have any questions for her, or if you have anything for me. So thank you again for listening. We appreciate your support, and we just want you just to continue to be healthy and be well. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this informative journey. The content of this podcast is solely the professional opinion of the host for informational purposes only. It should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you're experiencing any health issues or concerns, we strongly recommend that you seek the counsel of a qualified healthcare provider before making any changes.